Sometimes the most revealing moments happen when nobody expects them. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a dramatic sit-down interview with somber music playing underneath. It was a mother and daughter flipping through old photographs, laughing about the past, and somewhere in that laughter something surprisingly honest slipped out. Kelly Ripa, sitting beside her daughter Lola for a magazine feature, was asked a simple question about the future. And her answer wasn't the polished, media-trained response you'd expect from someone who has spent decades in front of cameras. It was raw. It was protective. It was, in her own words, something close to panic. Because when the subject of elopement came up, the idea of Lola one day running off and getting married in secret the way Kelly herself once did, Kelly didn't laugh it off. She didn't offer some breezy, "Oh, whatever makes her happy" answer. She said she would literally die. And then, half joking but clearly not entirely joking, she said something that stopped a lot of viewers in their tracks. "We would track her down and unelope her." It's a funny line. It's the kind of thing that gets clipped, shared, turned into a caption. But underneath the humor, there's something a lot more interesting happening. Because Kelly Ripa is not a woman who has any moral high ground to stand on here. She eloped. She married Mark Consuelos in Las Vegas in 1996, barely a year after they met on the set of a soap opera, with no ceremony, no guest list, no warning to either of their families. She was the elopement. And now, decades later, she's the one threatening to hunt her own daughter down through an iPhone location tracker to stop her from doing the very same thing. That contradiction is the whole story. And it's worth sitting with, because it says something about what actually happens to people when they become parents. Even parents who once broke every rule in the book themselves. Let's go back for a second because the origin story matters here. Kelly and Mark met in 1995 on the set of All My Children. They were young, they were consumed by their schedules, and by their own account, they never had a single day off together. So when they finally got the chance to be alone, they didn't plan a wedding. They didn't send invitations. They just went to Vegas and got married, almost as if it were the only sensible option available to two people who never had time to breathe. Kelly has described it plainly, it wasn't some grand romantic gesture dreamed up for the ages. It was two overworked 20-somethings who loved each other and didn't want to wait for permission or planning or anyone else's schedule. That kind of decision tells you something about who they were before they became the people millions of viewers now watch every weekday morning. They weren't cautious. They weren't waiting for the right moment, because there was no such thing as a right moment in their lives. They made the moment themselves. And that's exactly why her reaction to Lola is so fascinating. Because Kelly isn't warning her daughter away from spontaneity out of some inherited family value. She's warning her away from it because she knows exactly what it feels like from the inside, the exhilaration, the lack of a safety net, the way it can feel completely right in the moment and completely disorienting to everyone who loves you from the outside. She's not speaking as a hypocrite. She's speaking as someone who understands the weight of that decision better than almost anyone Lola could ask. There's a version of this story that plays as pure comedy, and to be fair, a lot of it is genuinely funny. Lola, for her part, seemed almost amused by her mother's panic, joking that her parents already track her phone, that there would be no escaping them even if she tried. It's the kind of exchange that feels completely familiar to anyone who has ever tried to make an independent decision as an adult child while their parents still see them, on some level, as the kid who needed reminding not to touch their eyebrows or wear leggings as pants. There's warmth in that dynamic. There's an ease between them that doesn't feel performed for cameras. It feels like the real texture of their relationship just happening to be filmed. But look a little closer and there's something quietly moving underneath the joke. Because what Kelly is really describing without quite saying it outright, is grief for a version of an experience she doesn't want her daughter to have. Not grief over marriage itself, she'd be the last person to argue against that. Grief over the parts that got skipped. The walk down an aisle with her father watching. The dress fitting with her mother in the room. The moment where everyone she loves is gathered in one place, watching two people commit to each other in front of witnesses who matter. Kelly didn't get that. She and Mark built an entire life, an entire family, an entire television career together, and the wedding itself happened in the time it takes to sign a piece of paper in a Nevada chapel. It's worth asking why so many viewers responded to this moment the way they did. Because on paper, it's a small, throwaway exchange in a longer interview. But it resonated, and it resonated for a reason that has very little to do with celebrity gossip and everything to do with something almost universal. Most people, if they're honest, carry some version of this same tension inside their own families. The parent who did something bold and unconventional in their own youth, who now finds themselves, almost against their own instincts, hoping their child chooses the safer, more traditional path. It's not really about elopement at all. It's about the strange arithmetic of parenthood, where the freedoms you fought hardest for yourself are sometimes the very freedoms you find hardest to watch your own children reach for. There's also something worth noticing in how Mark responded to all of this. He didn't dismiss Kelly's reaction, and he didn't necessarily disagree with it either. Instead, he pointed out, with the same dry humor that's made their on-air chemistry so beloved, that their own parents didn't exactly celebrate their elopement either, not right away. It reportedly took years before both sets of parents came around to what Kelly and Mark had done, which reframes the entire conversation. Kelly isn't just worried about missing a wedding. She may be replaying, without fully realizing it, the discomfort her own parents once felt watching her make a decision they had no part in and no ability to stop. That's the kind of detail that turns a light-hearted magazine quote into something genuinely layered. Because it means Kelly is standing in two places at once. She's the daughter who once caused her own parents that particular kind of heartbreak, and now she's the parent bracing herself for the possibility of feeling it from the other side. Anyone who has ever watched their own child grow into a person capable of making enormous, permanent decisions without asking for guidance first will recognize that particular kind of vertigo. It's also worth pointing out how much this moment reveals about the family Kelly and Mark have built, almost by accident, in full public view. Lola isn't hiding her relationship. She isn't cagey with her parents about her life. The fact that this entire conversation could happen so openly, with jokes flying back and forth and nobody flinching, says something about the kind of household Lola grew up in. There's no stiffness there. There's no performance of a perfect family for the cameras. There's just two parents who are still visibly, sometimes uncomfortably, invested in every part of their daughter's life, and a daughter who seems entirely unbothered by that, maybe even a little charmed by it. Longtime viewers of Kelly and Mark's morning show already know this dynamic intimately, because it's the same dynamic that plays out on air nearly every single day. The interruptions. The teasing. The moments where one of them says something a little too honest and the other one just shakes their head. What makes this particular story land differently is that it isn't happening in front of a studio audience. It's happening in a magazine interview in a much quieter setting, and the honesty still comes through exactly the same. That consistency is rare. A lot of public figures have an on-camera version of themselves and a private version that almost never overlaps. With Kelly and Mark, the gap between those two versions seems remarkably small, and that, more than any single quote about elopement, might be the real reason audiences have stayed loyal to them for so long. Because in the end, this was never really a story about a wedding that hasn't happened. It was a story about a mother who once ran toward the unknown without looking back, now standing on the other side of that decision, watching her daughter approach her own crossroads, and feeling every complicated thing a parent can feel in that position. Pride, fear, nostalgia, and a fierce, almost comic need to protect an experience that 28 years ago she chose to skip entirely for herself. Perhaps that's the reason so many people remain invested in Kelly and Mark. Not simply because they've spent decades in the spotlight together, but because audiences keep catching these small, unscripted moments where something real slips through. A joke about tracking an iPhone. A confession about wanting the wedding she never had. A husband gently reminding his wife that their own parents once felt exactly what she's feeling now. What do you think Kelly's reaction really says about the way she sees her own marriage all these years later? Do you think Lola will end up honoring her parents' wishes, or is there a little bit of her mother's spontaneity in her too? Share your thoughts, your favorite Kelly and Mark moments, and what this particular story brought up for you, because moments like this one have a way of staying with us long after the cameras stop rolling.